Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It is Professor Hamamoto on Sunday, July 5th, year 2026. The time is 4 p.m. And now for the moment you've all been waiting for, we have a special return guest, Mr. Leo Lion Zagami. He's going to go through an incredible array of new insights and information and analyses that he has come up with in this most recent book. I have the link below straight to the store, which you can make your purchase both in a hardback form, which I have, and the paperback version. So with no further ado, I bring you the great author, the author of the Vatican's Top Secret Alien Agenda, Hidden Encounters, Forbidden Rituals, and Jesuit Astronomers in the Age of Disclosure, Mr. Leo Lion Zagami. Welcome, Mr.
Always a
Zagami.
pleasure. Always a pleasure, Professor Hamamoto, to be with you and with the Cultural Forensic for the presentation of another book. As usual, we make it a tradition now.
Oh my gosh. And I'm honored to be able to sit with you today and review, because you will have to read the book yourself line by line to get the full benefit of it. But we're going to do an overview today, and I'm going to start with a question, a leading question about one of the figures that you talk about recurrently, and I was always wondering about him, his own work and his influence in this field of ufology, including his influence on one Steven Spielberg, who you write about extensively. And I'm alluding to Mr. or Dr. Jacques Vallée. So what is your intel on Jacques Vallée? I want to compare notes with you.
Well, as you know, my work is focused on the Vatican's alien agenda, which Jacques Vallée seems to be part of. And of course, he's one of those people who has not only been behind the scenes talking about this subject for decades, but he has been directly involved, and not only with Hollywood. Hollywood and Steven Spielberg based one of the characters from Encounters of the Third Kind, which, by the way, was a movie that Spielberg produced after they knocked at the door and said, will you be willing to work with us? And that was the naval intelligence. So Steven Spielberg has always been a gatekeeper, and Jacques Vallée himself is also a gatekeeper. Under Jacques Vallée, we have, under his mentorship, somebody who in the last few years has been spoken of in this field, which is Professor Diana Pasulka. So regarding Jacques Vallée, this year, for example, I saw a couple of clips of his presence at Content in Desert, which, as you know, takes place near where I live. However, I didn't go this year because it was filled with the enemy. It was like they invited me there at one point. Simply, one of my publishers said, "Why don't you come and maybe partake of one of these, special events that takes place before the actual formal event." But it's not really my style to face the enemy. In this case, I want to face him with facts, which are on the book, and the book was not yet ready. So I was rather honest with him, saying, I'm actually finishing something here, and I don't have the time, but I also don't have the will to go in front of Jacques Vallée, Knapp, Jeremy Corbell, or many others, Stephen Bassett, and every other gatekeeper who was there this year in, as you know, one of the main events regarding this subject. Amongst them, though, there was also the controller of all these gatekeepers, Danny Sheehan, who was a former Jesuit novitiate who for many years represented also the legal section department of the Jesuit headquarters here in the United States, and worked very closely with a couple of important Jesuits, one of them, George Coyne, and the other one before him, Patrick Trenor. And these people, of course, are former directors of the Specula Vaticana, which, as you know, in my book, features prominently. When you ask me about Jacques Vallée, my first thing here was to clear up the fact that he's no saint, that he is been taking advantage of the reverse engineering for his own pocket with all his startups that probably made him a multimillionaire by now in Silicon Valley. And he's also in the 70s. This is not even a secret in California. He was involved with Anton LaVey and with many other Satanists. It was almost cool at the time to partake in this modern Satanism. As you know, it was one of the products that also saw MK Ultra present. So I think that Jacques Vallée has a lot of skeletons in the closet. But for what I discuss in this book, of course, is simply part of all these gatekeepers. I actually, during my show yesterday, showed that just recently Al Puthoff, who is another huge gatekeeper, was actually talking about gatekeepers himself. Oh, we should find these gatekeepers. Yeah, well, I know they are there, but then they can't really talk. So you might find them, but then they're not authorized to, disclose what they know and all that BS, which usually follows these so-called disclosure advocates in the age of UFO disclosure. The Age of Disclosure itself is a documentary which features a lot of these gatekeepers, and everything is being prepared and orchestrated in a way that is digestible for the public. But very few people know that behind the reverse engineering legacy program, there is actually the Vatican itself. Like many other things we discussed in past episode of your show, when we discussed, for example, volume 12 of my Confessions, which also mentioned the fact that the Jesuits are prominent astronomers who, of course, were relevant even in Asia, because they went to China and exchanged knowledge and brought their own knowledge of astronomy there. Now, the interesting thing about this book is that I did it in collaboration with somebody who is a little bit in between me and the gatekeepers. Himself could be called a gatekeeper. In fact, I actually point that out at one point during the interview with Roberto Pinotti, which ends the book. Roberto Pinotti, as you may know, is one of the most prominent ufologists in the world. And he was the one who originally brought together the research and the documents that were given to him initially by a secret source that we reveal was the grandson of Benito Mussolini, regarding the Magenta UFO crash that even David Grush himself in 2023 confirmed was the beginning of what became the legacy program. And because of Italy and because of Italy's connection with the Vatican, it becomes very much prominent in the Vatican's interest, this whole alien agenda in the decades that follow, and that then give birth to one of those turning point events in the history of the Church, which was the Second Vatican Council, which is also a topic which we often discuss in your shows. So
Yes.
I'm all ears for your questions. And I must say that when I did this book, I was thinking, Professor Hamamoto needs to be happy here. So
Wonderful.
I always see you as somebody who not only simply reads my books, but tries to understand them in a very thorough way. And that gives me also the possibility of, an interesting conversation wherever we discuss a new book.
Oh, absolutely. Now, getting back to Jacques Vallée, which, by the way, you're the first person publicly that I've read or listened to, because most people approach Vallée in a very worshipful fashion because of his books, his contribution, his visibility, his proximity to Steven Spielberg. All his books are back in print. But I've always suspected of him being an intelligence asset. He has the profile of it, going back
Well, I mean,
different,
just think
yeah.
about it. Think about it.
Hmm.
He was working with J. Allen Hynek, but he was
Hmm.
also somebody who is depicted as very close to the military industrial complex in the movie of Steven Spielberg. So it's no secret
Hmm.
that he had that kind of access. And of course, his research also working for DARPA, for what became the internet. No, that I think
Hmm.
seems to be also a relevant factor in his professional life, as well as being involved even in the mapping of Mars for NASA. So, I mean, to have that kind of connections and security clearance. We're talking, though, about people that traditionally come all out of Stanford University or the Stanford Institute. It seems like this is like amongst all the gatekeepers, which I point out in my book, from Gary
Hmm.
Nolan to Pete Scaffish, they seem to have this link with Stanford. It's like almost like obligatory. And if you think about it, Stanford was the place where then in the early 70s, Al Puthoff put together also his remote viewing programs that eventually would be called Stargate after a series of names. But this
Hmm.
explains the fact that Stanford is not simply an educational institute of sorts. There is something more. There is very close proximities to government top secret operations and experiments.
Absolutely. And inspired by this most recent book of yours, Mr. Zagami,
Yeah.
I went back, and I've given talks on this before, but I went back deeper into the history of the Stanford bloodline. And I
Mhm.
discovered that one of his six brothers, Thomas Stanford, who emigrated to Australia, was a professional occultist who has written extensively in the area. And his sister in law, right, Mrs. Stanford, who was murdered, by the way, probably by the very first president of Stanford. That's what they're saying, David Starr Jordan, was heavily involved in the occultism. So the institution itself is hardwired in this whole occultic universe that you spell out here. So it precedes even the SRI, the Stanford Research Institute,
Yes,
Cal Putoff, and those other individuals.
yes,
And
yes,
it
because
continued, there's a continuity too. Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, then the Stanford Institute becomes like their specific depository to then develop certain, things that might maybe be too much to develop within a university environment. I mean, you are the professor here, so you can maybe describe me how it works in a university or in an institute founded by a university. I'm just, somebody who has an experience with the Jesuits, with the church, and of course a direct experience with their institutions and also with Freemasonry, which, as you know, in this book features heavily, especially in the first chapters, because it becomes that trade union at times with, for example, between Zaccaria Sitchin and Corrado Balducci, or, for example, the interest that people like Pierre Carpi, who was a P2 member, and then he becomes also the guy who receives by an undisclosed source these prophecies of John the 23rd, which tell us about his encounter of the third, the close encounter of the third kind, and also of his contactism, which is born within a lodge of Freemasonry, opening the Rosicrucian degree. So there is, for me, an interest in making these things known to the English-speaking world, because at times they have been limited to the French or Italian, and it seems like almost deliberate to avoid bringing them to the attention of the Anglo-Saxon world. It's almost like Jacques Vallée functions as a filter. Let's not forget that my book starts talking about another Frenchman who becomes the major influence on the change of theological perspective by the Vatican. I'm talking about Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. And I think that, of course, when it comes to Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, we all know the impact that he had also in the internet, at least on the theoretical and conceptual side. Probably Jacques Vallée had instead a more practical influence in the development of the internet.
Now, if I'm not mistaken, isn't Vallée's bloodline or family located in the south of France, where the Cathar heresy, if you want to call it that, had a very strong presence? Do you
Well,
detect that in his work? Pardon?
well, I
Huh?
mean, he comes from Pontoise, which
Mhm.
is in the center, really. I mean, it is a commune north of Paris in reality. So, but everybody that is involved with France knows very well that there is no way you can act in those fields without passing through Freemasonry, which is an institution which in France is enormously influential still to this day. I mean, we see that in most of the Western world, the Freemasonry has almost lost its appeal. It has problems in recruiting. It's kind of like, yes, okay, still there for those who really want to follow the tradition of the mystery schools of old within this formal frame. But it's not a really, instead, in France, it was the country, let's not forget, that in the 1800s broke with regular Freemasonry, so they could build a different form of Freemasonry, closer to politics, closer to the social political work that, for example, the Grand Orient of France does the Grand Lodge de France. And it's very interesting that it was actually the Grand Lodge de France that initiated the Nuncio Apostolico Roncalli, who will then become Pope John the 23rd, who will then have that contact experience in Istanbul. So definitely, Jacques Vallée claims to have a Rosicrucian connection. Now, I know for sure that if you claim in France to have a Rosicrucian connection, then you are linked to the Rosicrucians. And that will be, like you said, the south of France, because that is, let's say, their stronghold. And that, of course, we can go back in time and all the various heresies and whatever. But it's a stronghold because there is an immense Masonic tradition in places like Nice, in places, even Marseille was a port that was connected to the Knights Templar and has an enormous Masonic tradition. And then you have Paris, of course. So I think that Jacques Vallée is connected with a Rosicrucian, definitely a Rosicrucian order. And there is Rosicrucian orders that are highly secretive, not like the ones we have here in the United States, like, you know, Amorc. Amorc was built on the actual founder going to France and getting the charts to bring back and then start his own order. So France is really relevant, and I still have, as you know, contacts within this world. So if I really wanted to know, I could have actually probably called a few people in France and get to the bottom of it. Who knows? Maybe in the future I will, you know. But it's important, I think, to understand that the ambiguity of a guy like Jacques Vallée, when he goes to, for example, this year Contact in the Desert, and he admits there is aliens in laboratories that are experimented language communication with terrestrials and that. And then he stops suddenly and he says, but I don't have the clearance. So, you know, he goes back into that kind of thing, which also is brought up by Hal Pudov, Davis, and every single academic figure, which, as you see, the academic world is discussed in my book at the beginning, also like the birthplace of a specific kind of gatekeeper from the 90s onwards, because now we have hand in hand these academics with high security clearance and military, formerly military intelligence and all that. That is the new style that the people like, you know, because, oh, they are credible. Yeah, they are credible. But then, you know, they always tell you they know this, but they can't tell you that. And it becomes really annoying in the end. And it's kind of like, it's almost, I think, like they're anesthetizing the audience. Because when you know, are always saying, oh yeah, well, there is this, but I have signed, you know, a non-disclosure on this, I can't do this because otherwise I would be, I mean, what's the point of it all? And so then you have the guy depicted in Steven Spielberg's film, which is apparently somebody who, you know, some kind of a cyber nerd who suddenly worked for this company, who was doing this reverse engineering and then wants to reveal it to the whole world and blah, blah, blah. There is definitely an advancement from the prior, let's say, Steven Spielberg starts from the Encounters of the Fair. Yeah, I mean, he actually starts from the 1960s because apparently he already made, when he was only 17, a movie about lights in the skies and other things. I never saw this movie, but apparently that's something maybe to analyze in the future. However, when he launches first the Encounters of the Fair Kind, then you have E.T., then you have now, last but not least, after War of the Worlds, of course, this Disclosure Day. This Disclosure Day, it's his, you know, probably final psyop that he manages to give to his the people who, for the whole of his life, in some way have helped him out, because both the CIA and naval intelligence had the interest to use a guy like Spielberg to bring out this information. And at the end of the day, for this movie, though, we notice also the link with the Jesuits through the guy who actually writes his screenplay, who transforms a movie script into something more religious, which features prominently some elements of Catholicism and Jesuitry, which is unusual even for Spielberg himself, who always claims he doesn't want to put his religious business in his films, also because it will probably become a little bit awkward for him, as he was in Les Wexner's mega group, as he's close to Chabad Lubavitch, as he's close to Zionism. I don't think that the religious element will make him popular in the cinemas. But having said all this, the film is highly entertaining, but at the end, it hasn't managed to make the kind of money probably they were expecting from it. However, it's gonna be probably present in the next few months in every single streaming platform, and it's gonna be, you know, pushed still also in that direction once it goes out of the cinema circuit. I think that the message, though, is very clear. It's the same message which, from the beginning of the book, I discuss in relation to the Vatican wanting to embrace anything that comes out of a spaceship.
Now, what's interesting is in this book, I learned that in the U.S., the watershed mark is usually pointed to as Roswell, 1947, but you pushed this up over a decade to Magenta, 1933. I think that alone is refiguring the whole approach and understanding to so-called ufology. I wonder if you can talk about the Magenta phenomenon, because I had not heard about this before myself.
Okay. Well, when in 2023, David Grush made some public statements about it, I immediately knew what he was talking about, because my mentor in this field was Roberto Pinotti, who, with Alfredo Lissoni at the end of the 90s, beginning of the year 2000s, started to receive these documents that were later verified by a forensic analyst. and they were genuine. And then, of course, then it came out who was the source, and the source at the time was still alive, and it was the grandson of Benito Mussolini, whose story in itself is incredible, because his father was killed by his grandfather, basically, because he betrayed the father-in-law. So, but in regards to magenta, actually, we should be I mean, of course, we commonly refer to the event as the magenta crash, a little bit like Roswell. Though then when you start talking about the places where it actually crashes, a couple of different places, and they're quite far from Roswell itself. The same is with the magenta. It's between Magenta and Bergiate, these two places, okay, in the north of Italy. Once the UFO was recovered, it was initially brought to Bergiate, because there is a specific place which is still used to this day as kind of like experimental ground for new airplanes and other kind of things connected to the Air Force. But then it was brought to Montesorrate, which is another place even more secretive. And Mussolini, the first thing he does is to order absolute silence. So in the documents which I show, there is this first ominous warning by Mussolini, says assoluto silenzio, absolute silence. Whomever talks about this, independent journalists, mainstream journalists, any kind of journalist, you're going to end up in jail. So that gives you also the understanding of how worried they were about this discovery. And then there is the reverse engineering element, because when I originally heard about it in 2023, Roberto, I know for 20 years, he's a friend, so I discussed the subject in volume 9. I discussed it because it's in relation with that reverse engineering topic, which I was touching, as you know, in volume 9, connected to Cyber Satan, which is a trilogy which I touch in my confessions. For maybe for your audience who doesn't know the confession series, you can also read maybe on their own certain books, and this was part of a, let's say, 3-part series, volume 6.66, volume 7, and volume 9, dedicated to Cyber Satan. And from volume 7, I started acknowledging the reverse engineering element, because that is an important element. The moment in which you are reverse engineering something from somebody, but who is this somebody? Now, Mussolini initially believed that reverse engineering was essential, but he believed it might be Soviet, it might be American, it might be English, His reverse engineering efforts initially were focused on that. So when I heard the need of this RS-33 cabinet, of course, the reference seems a little bit too close also to, 33 degree, which, by the way, even during fascism, had a very important role, even if fascists officially persecuted Freemasonry. In reality, the quadrumvirate of Mussolini was shaped by Freemasons from the main two obediences, and they were all 33-degree members. So, it makes sense. However, in reality, Roberto explained, and Roberto is also Freemason, by the way, explained that it was, he discovered in the end, in the last few years, that RS-33 was also the archive in Milan dedicated to reverse engineering. So it's not even referred to the year 1933, like, some people could have the idea, 1933, no, that's not the case. So reverse engineering was something that obsessed Mussolini, obsessed Adolf Hitler, whom both tried to reverse engineer things. And when this whole UFO event happened in north of Italy, Mussolini, typical of him, proud himself in front of Hitler, oh, I have this, and let me call Himmler, the Anerb, they all arrive in Italy, and with the intention of maybe doing something. However, we had luck. we had the luck in the sense that maybe, the world would be a very different place. We would be talking Japanese, German, and Italian now. So if because the guy in charge of put in charge by Benito Mussolini was none other than Guglielmo Marconi, and Guglielmo Marconi ended up having his loyalty more towards the church than towards Mussolini. And so in the end, the reverse engineering actually was kind of thrown out of the window, which could have really changed the course of the war. And at the same time, the early reverse engineering, I'm talking of course about very early forms of reverse engineering, very basic, but very deadly. In fact, it was called the death ray, and could literally switch off any machine in any moment. Meaning you pointed at a car, at a train, at a tank, and it will stop. Imagine this, when I heard about the first experiment of the death ray that was apparently conducted in an area near Rome called Ostia, this was like 20 years ago, I heard about it, I was like, oh, no, this is unbelievable, guys. I can't believe this is possible. But then Pinotti told me this is possible, and he actually in the year 2000 published with Alfredo Lissoni, who is a professor of religion who he collaborated with, this book on the fascist UFO files, because it's not only about Bergiate Magenta, about this UFO that crashed. After it crashed, the UFOs apparently went searching for their own UFO. It seems like for 3 years, between 1933 and 1936, there were a number of events that happened, even events that were then drawn by politicians who were interested in this topic back then, like probably they are now in Congress in the same way, without knowing probably the whole, picture, because you can only know maybe little fragments. Today we know that from David Grush, the back channeling that got this UFO to America was planned by Pope Pius XII. However, in 1933, before Pope Pius XII, there was Pope Pius XI, but Pius XII was the secretary of Pope Pius XI. So there is a little bit of confusion that you can create there, but in reality, David Grush is right, because at that point in 1945, it was Pius XII who facilitated from the hangar in Montserrat this UFO to end up in probably New Mexico, because then New Mexico, filled with people like Enrico Fermi, directly from Italy, the Manhattan Project, which is then the early stage of the Department of Energy, which then becomes one of the key participants to this legacy problem. So then you don't only have Roswell, you have Roswell and you have other events in New Mexico. And they call them UFO crashes, but in reality, like Pasulka herself admitted, the scientists call them gifts. And these gifts, I will say to Pasulka, they're Trojan horses, so you can keep them. But unfortunately, we are actually using them as we speak, so they have some kind of utility, because this technology seems to be quite good. Today, I'm, broadcasting to you from the middle of nowhere with the Starlink, and it's technology that we probably will never have had without reverse engineering. But the problem is that this whole disclosure effort will only be finalized when the grid is closed and they have complete control over us. That's the big problem here. And if we don't get help from literally from above, we are destined for very bad situation that is going to develop rather quickly in front of our eyes from 2030 onwards.
Well, let's step back. You've alluded to Pasulka. We're referring to Diana W. Pasulka, who is a academic. She is a gatekeeper, and
Yes.
I agree with you on that. I've read her book, American Cosmic. Could you go into more detail her relationship with Jacques Vallée, and what function does, because she's younger, does Pasulka fit into this non-disclosure disclosure project?
Well, absolutely. But in fact, let's not forget, she even American Cosmic, this book that has become a bestseller
Mhm.
and brought her out of the academic world into the ufologic, now everybody says, oh, Professor Pasulka, she's so cool, she's this and that. Okay,
Yeah.
it's great to be a professor and to be cool, but to be cool, she was recruited by those military industrial complex people who then blindfolded her, put the thing over her head, like she admitted herself. I mean, if you read American Cosmic in a way that is not, a naive way, you understand that she has given in to the people who are making her, partake to their secrets, because, they show her this, they show her that. But who are these people? I mean, we're talking about people who are, of course, people with high security clearance. I mean, one is Gary Nolan, the other one is a guy called Taylor who participated to 25 launches of the space shuttle. I mean, and these people end up mysteriously going to the Vatican archives, and even more mysteriously, wow, they ended up in Castel Gandolfo. It's almost like at the end of the pilgrimage, they bow down after being in Roswell. I mean, come on, what is this? I mean, this is a joke.
By the way, ladies and gentlemen, all the names, Mr. Zagami names, are in this book, and he goes deep into their because usually he's a gentleman. He doesn't want to insult or hurt anybody's
No,
feelings.
no.
But here he's critical about.
Well, I mean,
certain
when you
figures.
have, listen, when you
Mhm.
have Professor Pazuka, who after admitting herself that she, that she actually, there was, she was in the home, in the library of Jacques Vallée, and takes out a book, and then Vallée said, ooh, watch how many pages this book, 660, because it was a book about the devil. So even Pazuka herself, when she saw the elements of the occult present in Jacques Vallée, I think she started to have a few doubts, but she didn't stop. You see, the difference is like Leo Zagami, after watching the Library of Vallée, after talking to Vallée, probably was a great Vallée, pleasure meeting. We see each other another year, maybe in another life. That's it. But instead, she starts her adventure there, because from there she gets to there, and then she gets to there, and then she gets to this other point. And in the end, the last year, she was at Soul Foundation, which is like the new Gatekeepers Extraordinary Organization, which nobody knows about and nobody even talks about. Every time, I face these big experts, from the UFO world, and I say, so Soul Foundation, they are, what? What is it? Well, just go on the web, open Google, put Soul Foundation, and you're going to see post-UAP disclosure preparation with all the list of, including Jacques Vallée. And you have them all there. You have them all. And it's a CIA operation. So, you see, at the end of my book with Roberto, I joke a little bit with him. I said, but this is a CIA, we couldn't be, he had been guested by them last year. I mean, my book was possible thanks to a guy who did a conference inside the Vatican about UFO. So, I mean, of course, he has this kind of, proximity to these people. He's a Freemason, still active, worship or master of a lodge in Florence. I mean, but because of our friendship that goes beyond these differences in opinion on also because he knows that I'm a jeune provocateur. He knows that I like to, when we started to talk about doing this book a year and a half ago, I told him, and he started to send me material and things. I said, yes, but Roberto, I mean, my audience wants the goods without let's say, without the controlling aspect that, because when Roberto goes there, it's like, well, disclosure should be done in a certain way. It's a little bit like listening to other people like Stephen Greer, who do no, disclosure needs to be done because otherwise the people will panic. I'm for just give it to the people and make the chaos start and the change completely this planet, hopefully, and if not for the better, for the worse, but who cares? At least we have entered this galactic not federation, that's a lot of BS, but this galactic reality with awareness.
I like your approach. You throw it all out there and trust it to the people to figure it out there. But I want to go back to Pasulka because she's kind of leapt to the foreground. She's jumped over a lot of people. She's relatively new to this whole area of research,
Absolutely.
But I
But in fact,
remember in reading American Cosmic when she was taken up the Tower of the Valais, Tower de Valais, and shown the book. And that was like a revelatory moment from her. Like you said, she did not go back down the staircase. She went ahead with it. And you write about that moment in your book. It's a seminal movement. So does Pasulka, is she involved with the Rosicrucian or Freemasonic lodges? Is she connected in some way to these initiatory organizations outside the university?
No, I think that she's very manipulated. I think she's very naive. I mean, I don't know if it's naivety or it's simply being relevant and wanting to move forward with knowing more and more. But the more you know in those cases, the more you become dependent from certain people. So I don't think she's an initiate. I don't think she's an initiate because of the way she reacted with Jacques Vallée when she saw that book, and the way she was actually, I think, genuinely scared.
Okay.
But I think that her curiosity, together with the fact that, as an academic, you might go on for 20, 30, 40 years doing your job and never really find any meaning to your life, to your purpose, because you say, okay, I'm teaching, but, so you want that thrill gets into your life. Suddenly, they tell you, suddenly they're putting you a thing and they're bringing you in front of a UFO. I mean, material from another planet. You are actually engaging with people who have top security clearance, who are trusting her. And if you remember in my book, I explained, she was searching for this reality by going to certain conference. But when you are an academic with her kind of appeal, that is the moment in which they knock at your door and they recruit you in a second. Or they recruit you, like she says, basically in a conference. They came there and they said, oh, cool. You want to know more? Yeah, no, fine. Give me a phone call. And then after, of course, they give you, but then there is a moment in which there is going to be a restriction on what you can say.
Sure.
Then there is another element, though, an element which I would like to know more about, but I didn't really have the time to, I mean, I couldn't make this book 1,000 pages. I didn't want to make this book 1,000 pages because it's already difficult to get people to read 450 pages, let alone 1,000. But when she says in American Cosmic, she claims that just like Alfredo Lissoni, who is the guy who I have used for my information on the Vatican archives, she says, Lissoni presented himself in search of the Christian legends. She instead says that she was invited to analyze a couple of possible Saint Beat. You are not simply invited. You must have been connected to the Jesuits or to the Vatican officially, so then they will invite you to the Vatican Apostolic Archive, previously known as the Vatican Secret Archive, which is a place where nobody has access. And she herself admits that. But then she makes an admission. My partner, which then she changes. Also, the other thing about Pasulka, she changes the names in American Cosmic because to protect seems to protect the innocent. So let's change the names. But I mean, come on. So she says that guy who is the guy who brought to the crash site in New Mexico arrived one day earlier to the Vatican, and by the grace of God, he manages to get into the archive because, and then actually, if you read American Cosmic, you discover that, that was such a momentum. He converted to Catholicism altogether. I mean, at that point, Diana Pasulka, you make me puke. because I mean, it's anxious. And then we went together to Castel Gandolfo e volemo se bene. Now, you can see, these people can talk to Americans this way, but I'm from Rome. I was born in the Policlinico Gemelli, where the Pope goes. I know every single thing of that place. I know where the bodies are buried in that place. That shouldn't, other people don't want to. I mean, there is secrets that are still there. I had to flee the country because of it. So it doesn't work like that.
Okay.
You're not simply let inside those archives and then you go, well, I was talking with Guy Consulman. What a great guy. I mean, she had to also stress that element. The guy, what a great guy. Well, let me tell you, this gentleman here is another crook. So, Pazuka, I'm sorry, but just go and work with Hal Puthoff and you can make a great Catholic gatekeeper organization. David Grush can join you and you can make a club. Then you have Danny Sheehan, who is the lawyer of Luis Elizondo and Stephen Greer. And it's a circus. But every day I put on the TV and I see this circus on the mainstream news. And I'm worried for the Americans, for the world, for the people who believe in this charade. So I wrote this book.
Thank you for the warning, because I hear these names that you would allude to, that you know their work quite well, but they're always being glazed on these talk shows like Joe Rogan and Jimmy Dore, who are all ex-comedians. They have no discernment, but they just do nothing but glaze people like Pasulka uncritically.
Oh, well,
Yours is the only book that calls these people out.
Yeah, but this book, in fact, you are one of the few people who has actually given me the time of the day. Aside from Dr. Salla, probably the only one who is actually focused on that particular, who has the courage to let me on his show and to actually acknowledge the importance of this book. I want to tell you a secret here that is going to create a little bit of, but we like a little bit, no? Professor
Absolutely.
Hamamoto? Okay. Prepare yourself, guys, because this is something I haven't even... Okay, so when I started the promotion of this book, it was natural for me to contact somebody who I deemed a friend, or at least somebody who I thought would be interested in promoting this book. And that was Laura Eisenhower, the great-granddaughter of President Eisenhower. She, together with Marisa Coscella, who is actually a friend, a good journalist from, and somebody who also does artistic work. And I mean, she said, no, we will do this interview. And, they were interested in this book. She's very Catholic. Laura Eisenhower, a little bit New Agey, but okay. They interview me. Ah, great. Wow, we want to do more of this, that, thing, tan. Then suddenly, they didn't want, the interview was not being uploaded on the channel. So I contacted Marisa. I said, what's happening here? Then I received a mail, which I still have. I'm not going to publish it, don't worry, Eisenhower. But this mail was kind of going back on the fact that which during the interview, I make some statements regarding President Eisenhower, which are the statements I make in this book. And she's like, well, he actually wanted to do something against these people. And it was almost like I was jeopardizing the name of her family. And that wasn't my intention anyway. So I said, okay, Laura, but are we going to move forward with uploading it or not? Oh, well, now I'm in England. I'm going to try. At the moment, in the end, she didn't upload it on her channel for hundreds of thousands of viewers. Marisa did. I must admit, she did a good thing. And then at that point, I said, okay, Marisa, at this point, I'm going to upload on my channel in its entirety without editing anything. Now, since then, Laura has not spoke with me anymore, and I don't think she will ever do that. But the thing is that she was so eager to criticize these people like Al Puthoff and all the rest, all these gatekeepers, because she has been in this environment. She has seen what these people are about. But yet, mysteriously, for some strange reason, now she doesn't want to promote this book. And she has been also guested by Roberto Vinotti in San Marino in Italy and stuff. But for some strange reason, suddenly, she doesn't want to promote this book. She hasn't uploaded. She hasn't even, she posts books on her side, things, profiles, and stuff. No, this book, this for me is a problem, Hamamoto, because, I'm the kind of guy who doesn't forgive very easily. And sooner or later, I'm going to make you, if you do something like this to me, because, if she was honest and she would say, okay, you discussed Eisenhower and my great-grandfather in a way that I don't agree, we can maybe edit it off, or maybe I'm not going to upload it, and be simply sincere about it. Then it's no problem for me, because friendship is more important than having views on the internet. I really couldn't care less. Or, the popularity. I'm not in it for a game of popularity. But the fact that you kind of like start creating excuses, and then at one point, I have to admit, even Marisa Coscella, who did the interview with her, she was embarrassed. She said, I'm really not happy about the situation. I think that this demonstrates that maybe somebody knocked at their door after the interview. And all those opportunities, maybe Contact in the Desert, History Channel, then fade out if you give your space to Leo Zagami. So that's why I say Professor Hamamoto, Dr. Salla, or other courageous people who had me on, it's a very small, because I'm never going to be on Jesse Michaels or on these big shows, Joe Rogan or whatever, because these people are, themselves gatekeepers. They decide what to do only if their intelligence officer authorizes them. That's how it works. That is psychological operation. That is part of the art of propaganda. So,
now, have you been invited back to the Alex Jones show? You enjoyed a really close relationship with him in the past.
That is
now?
That is another problem. That is another big problem, because the moment in which Alex Jones started to have his problems for the Sandy Hook thing, and then eventually that led to the closure of InfoWars, there was first an attempt to not have me anymore on the shows, which became very obvious. So when I then publicly, on my show, which is a very modest show because they censored me so much, my channel is like almost irrelevant. But when I said that specific thing, for some reason, somebody picked it up. And then Alex Jones was on the phone with the Rob Dewey saying, Leo, well, why are you saying this thing? What can we do for you? And then they offered me on a silver plate their channel there on Band of Video for a number of years. But I said, sorry, but why did you take me off the InfoWars stores? Why is my books off your store? There is something wrong here. After the lawyer in charge of the bankruptcy arrived, so then they admitted. The lawyer in charge of the bankruptcy took away my books off the store first thing, and then didn't want to have me on any longer. And when eventually Pope Francis died, that was, he was forced by his viewers. I was the Vatican expert for many years, and so he was forced on having me on for one last time for that thing. But now that there is no longer InfoWars, I doubted that he will ever invite me, because this is something that happened because of what was happening to him. It was almost like, in exchange for having me off, they were giving him a little bit of a break. And I don't want to say more.
Understood. Well, thank you for clearing the air on that. But since we're talking about...
it's sad because, when you know a person
Yeah.
And I worked for many years for Alex, sacrificing a lot, because in Italy, it put me on the spot with these people who then came after me really strong. So, you know, it's
Yes.
not like I did the shows without consequences. I had the police coming to me every 2 minutes, and court cases. At the end, I had to flee a country. And so
Yeah.
for me, it was initially very positive that, I mean, Alex, you know, I didn't get paid when I went on. We had simply the agreement that he would sell my books on his Infowars store. And it was like a fair deal. Okay. Now, one thing though happened, that after that discussion, me, Rob Dew, and Alex Jones agreed that I will have this band of video channel, and kind of, okay, I will continue with my own thing. Then there was this Daria, the producer of his show, who contacts me like a week after. Leo, I have a show for you. I was like, oh wow. Well, maybe, you know, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they're good people. It was a trap. They got this Jewish guy to interview me, who I think was from the Chabad Lubavitch himself. But he was, so that was kind of a little bit suspicious. He had this show on Band of Video. I can't even remember his name, so it wasn't that relevant. I mean, he wasn't really known. But because Daria asked me, I was like, okay, I'm going to do the interview, not knowing that it was a trap. Once I went on the show, he immediately said, oh, why did you say this about Alex? Why did you, you know, it was almost, you know, a typical, you know, I'm also a journalist. I know how journalism works. I know how, you know, so you are kind of talking to a professional here. And the guy wasn't that of a professional, but definitely there had been some kind of pre-organization between him, Alex, and Daria. And then I did the interview. And in the interview, he tries to depict me as the bad guy. And I'm like, suddenly saying, and I'm like, these guys are my friends? What is this?
Man.
So I mean, then they brought, you know, after they got me out of the picture, immediately they brought in Jay Dyer.
Oh my gosh. So that explains that.
Yes, no, he
Compared
was
to
like,
you, I mean, there is no comparison, Mr. Zagami.
of
Come
course it's,
on.
yeah, no, of course it's not,
Yeah.
but they had to have somebody to fill that gap.
Yes. Yeah.
Intellectually speaking, somebody who will touch on those topics. Of course, maybe not in the
Right.
same way, because not
No.
directly affected. I mean, he's a little bit, you know, plays academic, he's an Orthodox Christian, I don't know. But in any case, that was it. And I was like,
Yes.
shocked by the level of betrayal, the level of, you know, I mean, in Italy, we have a lot of sayings for what Alex did, but I mean, of course, I can't tell them to your audience. But however, it disappointed me, disappointed my wife, because, you know, when you go and the first thing you do when you arrive in America, and we had, you know, no money, no anything, we were in a difficult position. I was still an Italian in a foreign country, hoping to have the green card. Not like today I'm an American citizen, who cares? But back there I was a desperado. I tell you the truth. I arrived in Texas with a car full of my things, and that was all my belongings.
Oh yes.
And after, it wasn't like I had worked for a couple of years. I had worked from the moment he came to Rome in 2015, personally, to say sorry to me in St. Peter's Square and apologize for what he had said prior about me, get me on board with him, and then also supporting Trump, and then working for him until 2019 in Italy, and then, of course, here for a period of time, and then being treated like that. I mean, it's just unacceptable. I think that, you see, 20 years ago, when I started my Illuminati Confessions, it was just me, David Icke, Alex Jones. I mean, there were really a bunch of people talking about these subjects, okay? And I came out as the first, former something like former Freemason from a Lodge of the P2 in Monte Carlo, former Illuminati, and if you want to say former Freemason, because in reality Freemason is an initiation that you take for life, so in theory you're always okay. But today you have people like Sean Stone, who I knew very well. Sean Stone was my friend. Sean Stone nowadays doesn't even talk to me. And he goes on all these mega shows and presents himself as a former Freemason who discusses the occult. I was like, I think I had that somewhere.
By the way, he doesn't know anything. Sean Stone.
No, but the problem is that we were working together. It was a collaboration and a friendship, and that friendship is no longer there. For what reason? And and why do you go and you basically are selling yourself as a fake imitation of Leo Zagami to the big podcast, because he has access because of who he is to Piers Morgan, to the big guys that I will never see, because they don't want Leo Zagami to have visibility. And so I'm always struggling. And during the pandemic, they took away 5 PayPal. So I can't even access a PayPal anymore to receive a donation. I mean,
Sean Stone was being glazed by Tucker Carlson a couple of days last week, I think it was. He had a very long show. So yeah, I understand. I mean, these people are appealing to an audience that don't have discernment. They don't know any better. I'm not making excuses for them, but they don't know what's real and what is what I refer to a pop-up pundit. Someone just kind of appears, whether it's a Pasulka or Sean Stone or Jay Dyer, or there's tons of them now. Right. Speaking of which, what is your take? And you allude to it very briefly in the book, so I wanted you to expound on it. The sudden death of David, what's his name? He had a huge show. He's one of the early days persons.
David Wilcock. Well, he's
Wilcock, David Wilcock, yeah.
Well, my experience with him was negative. The guy was another opportunist of the worst kind. It happened to me in 2010, 2011. My father, actually, I think it was after the death of my father, I was with Christy in this remote village where I was starting to organize these really interesting events where I invited Princess Kaoru Nakamaro, the Grand Masters of Freemasonry, Pier Giorgio Caria, Bon Giovanni, Roberto Pino. I mean, I really made a name for this little village because there was this beautiful castle, which, by the way, the princess is the one that sold my family house. So she wanted actually to purchase this castle when I was 6, 7 years old, but we couldn't, because even if she was giving this castle for $25,000, which is nothing, it would cost $500,000 to restructure. We didn't have that kind of money. So I decided, though, once it was restructured by the state, to use this castle for conferences, and I made some amazing conferences there. At one point, I was, I remember one day organizing one of these events, and suddenly the phone goes on, and it was basically David Wilcock, who had received my contact from a dear friend of mine, and who wanted himself to connect with Benjamin Fulford, this former bureau chief for, I think, Forbes, who then went on this conspiracy because the Chinese, he got initiated by the Chinese Freemason of the Hongman, to create this info kind of platform in which he was, 6 million Chinese Illuminati are now opposing the New World Order of the Western Illuminati, trying to create this false dichotomy. It was just like a show. He went and interviewed also David Rockefeller, so he got a lot of attention from the media. And, I went to Japan, and I actually signed my first book deal thanks to him. So that was actually a positive thing. However, David Wilcock is like, I would like to get in contact with, but before saying that, I didn't know the guy. I know him, of course, I know him. I had seen some video, something on the internet. He had to tell me all his story that he was so great, that he was the reincarnation of Casey, that he was this and that and that. And I was like watching my wife, and I remember we were in this place, and I was like, "Jeez, man, this guy's like." Okay, I don't have a problem don't giving him the phone number of Benjamin. I couldn't really care less, you know. So I give him the phone number of Benjamin Fulford. And after, I don't know, just a few months, suddenly I hear them together on a YouTube video talking badly about me. I mean, I'm giving you the phone, I'm giving you the contact, okay? And you are bad-mouthing about my, I couldn't understand the whole thing. And it was all because of these Japanese who had been arrested in Italy with these bonds, but the bonds were illegal. So there was no way of cashing anything, because when you have a bond, if it's a nominative bond and you are not the name, you can, it's like paper, toilet paper, even if it's a trillion. And they were fixated with a whole conspiracy that will have changed the world, the assets and all this BS. Now, without going into that, the fact that they criticized me because I was the one who somehow had facilitated this, I mean, I was, it happened that in June 2009, I went with Christy, my present wife, to Japan. Christy had worked in Japan, so of course it was easy for me to go around with her rather than going on my own. And she said, no, I want to really, I think you in Japan you will have a lot of success. we didn't know what kind of success, but big in Japan, you know, like Alpha. And actually, once I was in Japan, everybody was eager to give me a book deal. And I suddenly, I didn't ever made a book in my life. So I was like, wow. I remember my first book deal was signed inside the karaoke place somewhere in Tokyo, in front of a Japanese beer. Fantastic. Okay, so I get to do this deal with this book deal, and I must say the Benjamin Fulford was pretty, okay, even if this Chinese connection didn't really fit in too well with me. Then he came to Rome, though. I brought him, he says, I want to come to Rome, and I would like to meet some other members of the P2, some people that can be relevant for, for my work, whatever I'm doing. I said, no problem. Come to Rome. I have an apartment which is actually in Rome. I can actually leave you there in my apartment, and I can go out of, because at the time I was spending more time outside of Rome than inside of Rome. So I said, okay, no problem. I will bring you to Rome. I will also connect with all the people I know in Rome and in Milan, also people in the Vatican. So all kinds of people, Freemasons, people from the Vatican. So, he could, interview, I still thought about him as a journalist more than, and so I remember then on the last day, I brought him to this salumiere, this alimentari, where he had to buy, I don't know, 100 kilos of salumi, prosciutto, all kinds of different salami. He wanted to bring back, I don't know how he made it back into Japan with that kind of stuff, because he brought some weird stuff. Even myself, I never even tasted some weird insides of animals and stuff, whatever. But in any case, in my book, as you know, he's featured.
Yes.
Because after his visit, something went missing from my apartment. And that something that went missing was, for me personally, very relevant and important. And it was also for a period of time had been classified by the Italian military intelligence, which is my own encounter. I mean, Fulford had the courage to come, I remember, in front of one of my collaborators, and he said, why, Leo, let's evoke them here. Let's do this evocation here in front of my wife. He said, let's do this. I was like, is this guy insane? Are we going to evoke an entity here? What does he think? This is a joke? I mean, it was just like, but I wanted to cite him in this book because, you know, he likes to go on the internet and even ascribe my, you know, he even says I'm responsible for Fukushima. I mean, that's something most absurd thing I ever had. But, you know, all kinds of things he accuses me. So he has this tendency to embellish things and to, because I think he has an audience that is really eager to listen to all kinds of things from him that might not really be 100% accurate or credible. Because, you know, when you come from a background in serious journalism and then you move towards another, but you still have that background that makes you credible. I remember when with him, I met for the first time Princess Kaoru Nakamaro at the foreign press headquarters in Tokyo. And I remember that after I meet, you know, it was an important thing, so there was secretary thing, you know, we all sit down. And then at one point, I meet a journalist, a friend of mine because I'm a member also of the foreign press in Rome. I was myself, I knew the head there, all friends. And I meet Pio D'Emilia. Now, Pio D'Emilia is no longer with us. I think he died last year or a couple of years ago. A great journalist, one of the greatest Italian correspondents from the Asia, especially from Asia. And he came and said, Leo, I would like to have a word with you. He come. I go, I remember the bar there is very nice, all black. I don't know if you ever been to the foreign press headquarters in Tokyo, a very nice place, all
Yes,
black.
I have, yeah.
Yeah, so it's all nice black, all nice, you know, then there is the bar over there. So I go over there, no? While Princess Kaoru is there with my wife and with this other agent, literary agent for the books. And Fulford and Pio D'Emilia, do you know who is this guy? I said, well, I mean, yeah, he used for Forbes. No, this guy is going dangerously insane. So he warned me. He was like, Pio said, you know, Leo, I know that you're a serious guy. You know, I know Pio from Rome, you know, we have a lot of friends in common. So he was a serious journalist. So he comes to me and said, Leo, I don't really feel like you're associating with somebody, you know, serious. Well, I said, well, I don't know. I mean, he had just presented me Princess Kaoru. We are about to publish the book. I was like, you know, let's see how it goes. So then after, I remember meeting Pio after in Rome and discussing this whole thing after I discussed the whole thing once I understood that there was something profoundly wrong with the Fulford. So that is my experience. But Wilcock was a disappointment. And the biggest disappointment was when I arrived here in America. Because when I arrived here in America in 2019, I had made a book on this subject, Invisible Master, my only prior book on this subject, aside from, of course, the occasional mention of certain topics within my Confession series. And the publisher, CCC Publishing, the company that published my first 5 books here in America, and Brad Olsen, was at the Contact in the Desert, because he's been guested a lot of times there. I found the whole thing a little bit weird because he didn't have an official invitation for me to go. You know, I'm coming to Palm Springs. He knows that I was actually going to, it wasn't related. It was simply that I was going to Palm Springs and I found a nice place to stay, which then eventually would become my home. So I said, okay, but I'm going to go and visit these people. I want to see what this Contact in the Desert is all about. And we can say that basically Contact in the Desert was for me the inspiration to start the research that brought to me to this book. Because when I was there, I'm like a truffle dog. I smell the truffle. And when I smell government agents, I'm like, government agents, Jesuit agents. So it kind of, and I started to see there was a lot of connections. There was Jacques Vallée at that time. There was David Wilcock, who was up in his room. And David Wilcock didn't have the courage to come downstairs and say hello to me. He was actually, at the time, with 6 bodyguards up in his suite, scared of me. And me and my wife were laughing, like, wow, laughing about it because I said, this, why is he scared? I mean, me and my wife are basically arrived here in America desperate. I mean, I didn't really have, these people were not really interested in Leo Zagami. Okay, there was Jimmy Church at the time, gave me an interview there, of course. And then there was Laura Eisenhower who introduced herself, and there was the guy with the funny hair from History Channel, what's his name? That with that Greek surname, I think. That guy with his hair all up.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Aliens
yeah,
show. Yeah.
ancient aliens
Yeah.
show.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, yeah. So there was all this kind of people. But I remember that there was at one point I met some people who were good people who I'm still in contact with now, and they were like starting to warn me about things. So when, being just around the corner, I was invited to go there every now and then, apart from the pandemic pause, which closed down the event for a couple of years, I think. And then I started to go back. I was invited also to one of these receptions with that Nick Pope and all these people, I just had the sensation that there was something profoundly wrong about the whole thing. And then one guy comes to me and says, this year there is, that was last year, there was Rose Courtyard, and it was full of government agents. And then there is Danny Sheehan, and you should look into these people. And so I started to look into these people, the knapp of the situation. I wanted to see all the connections. And I think that with this book, I made an excellent job in doing that. But of course, this book is going to be like almost, if they could burn it in Contact in the Desert, like they were burning Giordano Bruno on the stake, or when they were burning the books of William Rake, I think they would burn this book there, because it really shows who these people really are. And they are pieces of shit. Sorry if I say.
No, yeah.
I wasn't very academic, but it had to be.
No. I wanted to hear this. I think you really cleared the air on a lot of these characters. Now, one figure that I read myself, and he comes up here. You recognize him. That I'd like to get your opinion on him. Eric W. Davis. What's the intel on Eric W. Davis?
I mean, the Davis memo. Did you ever read the Davis memo?
Probably, yeah. He's one of those people who can push forward. Davis is right now.
The Davis basically is one of is together with Al Puthoff, almost like an extension of Al Puthoff, So he's one of those people who goes in front of Congress members and 4 races of aliens. I can't tell you anything. It's classified. It's all classified. It's all giving you small glimpses of truth. And of course, he was a Contact in the Desert this year, which demonstrates really what kind of people there was. But Davis is part of the problem. Davis is part of the problem. There was this Davis memo that was done apparently in the early 2000s. It was a document that will be actually acquired by the Congress in, I think, 2003, where there is an admission from this admiral and from him regarding the genuinity of Roswell, of the body found, of the actual, the whole thing, which leads, of course, inevitably to the legacy program. And at that point, in that memo, the admiral said, I didn't have the opportunity of going further, but Davis has gone further. Davis is the kind of guy who, like Al Puthoff, knows how to keep a very high level of security clearance. So I think that it's almost inevitable that these people all work together and they have the same kind of, not only the same kind of trajectory, but also the same kind of modality. So I would be not surprised if next year in Contact in the Desert there will be Al Puthoff himself directly there, because it was almost like they were preparing, let's prepare this audience, let's give them a little bit of this and a little bit of that. So the people were like really hungry for truth. And then you have Danny Sheehan I've been invited by Pope Leo the 14th to Castel Gandolfo. That's it. Close down the event. Banish it from the face of the earth. You're a bunch of Jesuits, stooges. I mean, it's incredible the admission they make. But the people are still there, eager. We would like to know more, simply because the guy is an astrophysicist or the other guy is doctor this or professor that. With all the respect, my father put all his specializations, and my father was a guy who had PhDs of this, that, and all the other. He put them on the toilet in my house, all over the toilet. on top of where you flush the toilet, there is actually his mental, and he was a guy who worked for MK Ultra, was judged one by Pravda in 1968, judged them as one of the 200 biggest intellectuals in Europe, and he put it in the toilet. Because once you take this piece of paper, who is giving it to you? And what do they want from you? So what? You have to be like Carl Gustav Jung, that for the whole of his life didn't publish the Red Book, or was scared of putting his name on the 7 Sermons to the Dead? Do you have to bend your knee down every time, you know, to the progressive forces that dominated the university agenda? Screw yourself.
And we're speaking of Dr. Elio Zagami.
Yes,
correct?
Dr. Elio Zagami.
Psychiatrist.
Psychiatrist.
MD. Yeah. Medical doctor, MD.
Yes. And on top of that, he also worked at the Sorbonne in Paris for MK Ultra, doing some very important experiments. So,
well, I hope you will write about your father, Dr. Zagami.
Let's say that volume 11 has included some small elements of it. There will be probably, it will be relevant to maybe traduce some of his books in Italian, in English. That will be maybe a job that could be important, maybe, you know, in the future, if I have the time and the right set of mind to do it, I will do it, yes. It is important to understand that after he went through that period of working within the establishment, he rejected MK Ultra, like he rejected the fact that they were using psychiatry to destabilize the political scene. They were literally locking up people, even in Europe. You know, they were saying that if you became a political dissident in Russia and Soviet Union, you would be locked up and they would do electroshock and basically ruin you. Well, the same thing happened in Europe. And that shocked my father. My father, in the middle of the 70s, profoundly rejected what psychiatry was, you know, because nowadays, finally, we have an open discussion about MK Ultra. But this open discussion is just like too late, too little, and it's inconsistent. I mean, if you saw what I saw the other day, I think probably you saw the hearings, MK Ultra hearings.
I wanted to ask you about those, your opinion of the hearings.
I mean, I wrote a book, volume 11 of my confessions, as you know, based on the research on MK Ultra and all the rest. No? And did they reveal anything new? Nothing, apart confirming maybe the fact that Charles Manson and his family were involved with the mind control program, MK Ultra. But you see, for example, when it comes to then they mention Operation Midnight Climax also. But they didn't really dig deep. Because if you start digging deep, that plausible deniability of the CIA will go out of the window, and then you will be served with a bunch of money, you know, a bunch of lawsuits that ends up with a lot of money from a lot of people who have been damaged, because, you know, they were doing this in... not only in America, but also in foreign countries where they're still seeking for compensation, like Canada in particular. But there was also same experiments conducted here. And then let's talk about the remote viewing that was born after the MK Ultra, because then MK Ultra was like the Kickstarter. But then what happened later? because MK Ultra officially ends in 1973. But even in the hearings the other day, there was somebody saying it hasn't ended up in 1973. So what is this? It's like, and then we have, I mean, it's really becoming a circus, that Congress, especially, I mean, I used to be somebody who believed politics could still make a difference, but it's becoming just so absurd. I mean, you have the bullshit of the situation, the Burlinson, the Anna Paulina Luna, who then start going after this. Let's expose MK Ultra. They don't say anything. Let's expose the JFK files. Nothing. The aliens. Nothing. It's just like a nothing burger every time. And they are like after, yes, Anna Paulina Luna, she's doing a great job, and that, and Burlinson, you know, I talk about them at the beginning. I could not talk about that whole event with the evangelical pastors because it was almost like the stuff of a comedy. I mean, the video of the guy when he's like almost beaten up by the man in black and goes officially there and says, no, it wasn't the words of the politician who now is, we know it's Burlinson. It was my own fault, my own idea. And I mean, no shame. No shame. If it was me, I will, okay. If I heard that from my ear, okay, there is a national security problem with this, who cares? Arrest me, jail me, crucify me, whatever. It's about courage. And these people who, you know, are there, we're gonna expose the Epstein files. I'm sorry, but the Epstein files have not been exposed. I made a book about it, and then in the end, I discovered that not only I'm right, but I'm probably going to have to do volume 2 on top of this, because there is so much material still that needs to be discussed and analyzed. And it's shocking to see that the Americans are still there believing the QAnon conspiracy rubbish.
Absolutely. Well, I did want to ask you what you're going to be working on next. You're going to do volume 2?
Wow. Well, I mean, I have a few ideas in mind, and I'm
Okay.
not, of course, going to disclose them all. There is another idea, though, that will probably be relevant for the foreseeable future if I can, you know, because the problem is here, and I'm sure you agree. Every time I do a book, I have to bring some novelty to the table. Otherwise, what's the point of it? You know, when I see there is like, I don't know, 50 new UFO books every week, and they all say the same things. Oh, we saw this and this. This guy has said this and this. Then we have the Jack Valet of the situation, who one volume after the other of half truths or revealing this, but not too much, coding it with a little bit of chocolate and a little bit of vanilla, because otherwise the people might get too shocked. And then you have the Pasluka of the situation, who, you know, I mean, I'm trying to bring something that is impactful. And I realize that the more I move forward, the more I risk my life doing that. So I always have to keep absolute secrecy about the next project to avoid being whacked.
Oh, I understand.
Because if the people who I mentioned in this book knew about it before it came out, they would have done anything possible to stop the publication of this book.
I understand.
And it's going to be the same. And the same regarding the Jeffrey Epstein material that I've included, and the links that then I made with, for example, the Sabbatean Frankists, that they were then picked up by an alleged professor who is not really a professor, but like all the Chinese likes to imitate everything. What's his name?
Oh, so-called Professor Jiang.
Well,
he was trying to steal my act, right? By calling himself professor. By the way, the guy, Dr. Stephen Kinzer, one of the people testifying in Congress about so-called MK Ultra, he's not a doctor either.
Yes.
In fact, he was a lifelong journalist with the New York Times.
No,
So
but
he's just
I saw that. No, but you know what I noticed also? At one point in the MK Ultra hearings, there was actually a real doctor, I think, who had been called there, but she didn't actually, was not really wanting to discuss MK Ultra, but a completely different thing regarding the NHS that didn't have anything to do with MK Ultra. She was there saying, so, and so over and over again, the interviewers, they were asking, so why are you here? And she was like, so these people make these big events, which are like all kind of, you know, and then after they invite people who don't even know why they're there and don't even have a saying in that matter. So I'm not at all surprised that then you will find the people presenting themselves for something else.
Oh, yeah. Well, speaking of presenting themselves as something else, Paulina Luna herself grew up in a Messianic Judaic family, and she calls herself a Christian.
No. Let me stop you right there, Professor
Please
Hamamoto.
expand. Correct me.
No, because the problem is, you know, I fortunately have a lot of Jewish friends, and I must say, even with all the enemies that I have in Chabad Lubavitch movement and all that, I have still some very good friends in the real Orthodox movements that don't accept the Sabbatean Frankist rubbish, who reject completely all the false premises of the Chabad Lubavitch and all that other rubbish. So those people there intervened with me after the publication of the book because they saw that everything I wrote is correct. In regard to Anna Paulina Luna, though, they were like themselves surprised because apparently Anna Paulina Luna, who herself is describing herself as the product of a Messianic Jew, they discovered that apparently the grandfather was a Nazi.
Oh my gosh.
And that apparently it seems like the only way she could be a Jew is like a Sabbatean Frankist, because in regards to her Jewish upbringing, we are not there. And like I said, they are like, Leo, we are surprised what she's even claiming, because apparently, Luna is not her surname.
No.
Okay. But apparently also her way of proposing, this origin from Judaism to cover up maybe something that is even more, because then when you go into Nazi Jews, I mean, the most famous Nazi Jew was Adolf Hitler. So, I mean,
don't tell anybody.
Let's not tell anybody. But having said that, Anton LaVey, who, by the way, appears in this book because he was a dear friend of Jacques Vallée.
Right.
So we take it out, people, but Jacques Vallée is a nice guy. Well, yeah, this Jacques Vallée, young Jacques Vallée, in the center, Anton LaVey. Okay. So Anton LaVey himself said the ideal Nazi is a Nazi Jew, and the ideal Satanist is a Satanic Jew. I mean, he was really into. But then, like I explained in this book, Anton LaVey came the family from Saloniki. I mean, from a headquarters of the Dome of the Sabbatean. So it shouldn't be really a surprise. And then who he goes and blesses and initiates into the fold? Marilyn Manson, another Sabbatean Frankist. These people want to destroy Christianity, but they also are not your average Jew. However, one thing that has always been told to me that I find fascinating is that he died in a Catholic hospital surrounded by nuns, scared shitless of facing Satan and hell. So that is, I don't know if it's just a matter of legend, but apparently that was happened with Anton LaVey.
Incredible. Well, we've run for 90 minutes now, and I assure all prospective buyers of this, you have to go on right after the show and purchase it, because you are going to have your mind completely blown by the revelations here and the connections. And if you thought you heard some smut, some dirt on people today, you got to read the book. Man, Leo Zagami does not hold back, as you can tell. I'm so happy for this interview.
Oh, no,
please.
I'm glad. You know, another thing, though, that is really weird, really weird, and I know that is your friend, but this happened 2 times, and now I want to make it public,
Mhm.
okay? Because Sean Atwood, okay? You've been on his show.
Yes.
Okay, so this happened 2 times. With Leo Zagami, you can get it wrong once, but 2 is too much. Now, 3-4 years ago, during the pandemic, I was contacted by his representative who wanted me on the show. At the time, I was like, I will intervene, but it will have to be live. And okay, that didn't happen. Fine, no problem. Month and a half ago, before this book came out, I'm contacted once again. We would love to have you on the show, your experience as a Freemason, as this, as that. We really want you on. Sean wants you on, and tint and tank and tra. And it was the official mail, so it wasn't like I have it. I can send it to you if you want. I mean, it was like really interested in having me on. I said, oh, well, great. I'm about to publish this book. It will be an opportunity to promote this book. Never heard from Sean Atwood again. Never heard. I wrote to him. I said, listen, but you say you wanted me on the show. You were so eager to have me on. You write me this big email. Nothing. So I leave it to you, Professor Hamamoto. It's very suspicious.
Okay.
I mean, when you behave with me once, it's okay. You didn't, maybe, I said, okay, they don't want me because I want to be live and they have some problem with me being live. Maybe. I thought, that is a problem. This time it wasn't that. They offered a live show. And I thought, okay, great. Finally, I have a guy who has hundreds of thousands of people following him. It might be an opportunity. Disappeared. I said, you know what I said in the email? I said, well, I had very good things from our common friend, Professor Hamamoto. So I hope I'm not putting you in a difficult position here.
No. And Mr. Zagami, I'd like to ask you for a piece of personal advice as a friend to friend, regarding Mr. Sean Atwood, because after he had on as a guest to his show, Alan Dershowitz, you know who he is, right? The attorney. Did you see that show?
No, I missed it. I need to see it. I'm going to see it. I'm going to see it.
As offensive it was, I watched the show. I mean, I had my question marks, but what was disappointing for me is that Sean Atwood was buttering him up, and he folded on Alan Dershowitz. This was a golden opportunity to call out Alan Dershowitz for the evil person. He can fucking sue me if he wants to. If he hears talking about Alan Dershowitz or anybody. So he caved in on that. So I wrote him back. I said, I'm not going to be on your show. I'm not interested. Yeah, I'm not going to. However, okay, there's a second part to the question. And answer me honestly, or you don't have to answer.
No, I'm
okay. All right, you're taking it in. So just the other day, he invited me back on the show to talk about a different topic, but I already said I wasn't going to do it. Should I change my mind on that, my position, and go on the show talking about unrelated?
I think that if it's live and you can actually, honest, I mean, I don't know this guy. I know his past history. We all have a past history. I was in the rape business myself, so I know how things work. I don't have a problem absolutely with him doing what he's doing. But I have a problem when you start behaving in an ambiguous fashion. And if you have a problem with Professor Hamamoto and now you want him on the show again, well, maybe it's an opportunity to clear things up out in the open air and make things... Because I don't think that we are so many that are denouncing this word that we can start arguing with each other. And then, because wouldn't it be nice if we were all united against the real enemy instead of, Alex Jones doesn't want to have me on. Why? Because he's risking his business. Who cares?
Yeah,
The main business, this is not about business. This is about a mission. And the mission is to fight a system that is obviously corrupt. And the system is closing down on us. We don't have much time, because once the AI reaches a level of perfection that as soon as I open the mouth, they close down the whole computer, everything, and me and you will not be able to talk these truths anymore when they will be deemed inconvenient. That will be, guys, I can already anticipate that will be when they give you the full disclosure. They will parade in front of you, body of aliens, anything, because you will not be able to do anything, because the moment you say, but I want to be a real revolutionary, yeah, a robot will come at your door, kick your ass, and then microchip you, and you are a slave. So the time that we have between the closure of the grid and the freedom that we still have is not that much. And so I will suggest people like Sean Hotwood and other people to open their eyes to the real enemy and to focus on that, regardless of our different views and stuff. If you want to fold in front of Alan Dershowitz, that's a problem with your own conscience. And, of course, you, Professor Hamamoto, have the opportunity to go back in front of him and say, yes, fine. But what happened the other time? Let's be honest. Sure. And that's why, from the first time, I said, I want it live.
Mr. Zagami, thank you. That's an excellent summary with your advice there. I feel like I've just gone to confession.
Bless you, my son.
I feel a giant weight lifted off of me.
No, I mean, actually, it's funny that you say that, because I was interviewed by a guy who was actually an actor. He does movies. He has a relatively small podcast for what he has done, called Far Out with Faust. I'm actually going to mention your name, so maybe you can go with it. But he has depicted me with an AI thumbnail in which I'm a priest in front of this alien that gets baptized by another prophet. Then
I can see it.
But there is another thing. There is another thing that made me laugh. I made this interview with Dr. Sala, and there is obviously people who don't hear the full interview, and of course will never read the book. And then they will write on the comment, Zagami wants to baptize the extraterrestrials. We have to intervene. What are you talking about? I mean, this guy is baptized. This guy, for me, I'm my number one enemy. You're telling me about... Guys, I don't know. I mean, it seems like this world is a little bit... My mother says this world has gone really bizarre and really weird, though. Since she's from 1944, she can understand that a little bit better than us. She said, Leo, don't worry. You have an audience for the next few decades because the world has gone completely berserk. Well, thank you so much for having me on, Professor Hamamoto. As usual,
Absolutely.
It's been very engaging.
Mr. Zagami,
and
thank you so much for being
Send
such a
my
brilliant
regards to
guest.
Sean Atwood. Send my regards to Sean
Okay. I will follow your advice, sir.
It's an opportunity, Everybody
I think so.
can clear their situation, and it's better to do it in front of the world. We don't have to hide things.
All right. No,
We don't have to hide.
No. I think this is why I'm discussing it with you openly.
Absolutely.
Right.
So blessings to your show. Continue doing what you're doing, because you're always doing a great job. And we speak soon, maybe for a new book. Who knows?
Absolutely. Good night now. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, there you go. Another incredible interview with Leo Zagami. It's always a delight. It's a surprise, and I learned so much. Once again, you must right now order this book, hardback or paperback, and let me know in the comments, or hit me up on Patreon. Let me know what you think about the book. Until then, we'll see you next Sunday, God willing. Bye. Thank you.